David walked into the hotel lobby, his figure just appearing from the large glass door. The door opened gently, bringing with it a cool breeze from outside, but the atmosphere inside the lobby was still heavy. He walked without haste, holding a simple black card, nothing particularly noteworthy. No luxurious suit, no trendy glasses, just an old shirt and worn-out shoes. There was nothing about him to attract attention, but the black card in his hand spoke volumes. Monica Reyes stood behind the front desk, her eyes briefly glancing at the man before her. She didn't rush to check his luggage or greet him as she did with other guests. Instead, her gaze scanned from his worn shoes to his faded shirt and then returned to meet his eyes. Those fleeting judgments couldn't hide the contempt. She smirked, her tone mocking. "Are you sure that card is yours?" Monica said, her voice cutting through like a light jab. Her words weren't a question, but a confirmation of a truth already settled in her mind. That black card couldn't possibly belong to a man like him. David didn't answer. He just stood there, his gaze unwavering, neither fearful nor angry. Silence filled the air, heavier than ever. In that moment, there was only the contrast between Monica's scornful look and David's calm composure. Strangely, the silence in the lobby only highlighted the differences between the two people standing before each other. Monica looked down at the black card, her fingers holding it as though it were a dirty object unworthy of touch. The light reflected off the surface of the card, but she didn't show any curiosity. Instead, she shook her head and placed it down on the counter, without a shred of doubt about its nature. The room began to quiet down, curious eyes beginning to take notice, but no one dared to speak. And David remained standing there, silently, indifferent to the gazes and words, as though he were accustomed to all of this. Monica still held the black card in her hand, her fingers playing with it as though it might dirty her hands. She looked up and glanced at David once again, but this time, her gaze wasn't as arrogant as it was before. Instead, there was a hint of doubt. She quickly turned back to the computer screen, typing with a steady rhythm, but the rhythm felt hollow, lacking determination. David didn't rush. He still stood there, his gaze unchanged, completely calm, showing no discomfort or insecurity. He knew that nothing could alter the course of this moment. He had lived through too many moments like this, where the disdain from others was just a faint shadow, incapable of shaking him. In his eyes, Monica was like a fleeting figure, unable to affect the steadiness he held within. "You understand, right?" Monica spoke up again, her tone still unchanged, almost as if testing him. "We only work with important partners, right?" The question wasn't really a question, it was a statement. She wasn't expecting an answer from him, and from the very beginning, Monica had seen herself as the one with the power to judge the worth of others based only on what she saw on the surface. David didn't respond immediately. He just looked directly at the computer screen, watching her fingers move across the keyboard. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to defend himself. It was his silence that highlighted the truth hidden within this space. Silence wasn't surrender, it was steadfastness. The entire lobby was quiet. No one saying a word. The curious glances returned, watching this strange scene unfold. And in that moment, a question unexpectedly emerged in the air. Is surface judgment truly accurate? Can a person's value really be measured only by what the eyes see? Monica looked down at the keyboard, her breath pausing for a moment, then continued typing out meaningless characters. She had made a decision, but deep inside she couldn't help but wonder. That black card, which she had once thought was a joke, refused to leave her mind. David remained still, his expression unchanged. The heavy feeling of suspicion began to fade away like a light rain, with no sound or movement able to shift the calm silence. Monica lowered her head, her hands still gliding across the keyboard, but there was no longer any certainty in her keystrokes. She felt something shift in the air, an unfamiliar feeling, as though the hotel lobby itself had stopped breathing. After a moment, Monica began to feel a suffocating weight in her chest. She was no longer certain of the decision she had made, not just about David, but about how she had treated him. That feeling crept into her mind as she could no longer deny that she had hastily judged him, based solely on appearances. "Are you sure you're not in the wrong room?" Monica tried to challenge him again, but this time, her voice lacked the coldness it had before. There was a hint of hesitation. She realized that she wasn't just facing David, but a reflection of herself, a person who had always judged and set standards without ever considering what lay deeper. David didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, his eyes still calm, but with something she couldn't quite grasp. He didn't argue. He let her confront her own thoughts and actions. At this moment, the atmosphere in the lobby seemed unusually silent, as though every sound had stopped to witness this moment. The entire room was filled with curious gazes, but David didn't feel the tension or discomfort. He knew exactly where he stood and didn't need to do anything to prove it. Monica, after a moment of silence, could no longer suppress the confusion inside her. She took a deep breath, then looked up, her eyes no longer sharp like before. What she thought was power now slipped out of her hands, gently but unmistakably. In that moment, she realized that it was David's silence that had made her reflect. It wasn't a defense or justification, but the quiet confidence in his stance that highlighted everything she had wrongly judged about him. The black card was no longer a mere symbol of wealth or power. It had become a mirror reflecting everything she had done. Monica couldn't deny the truth any longer. Every challenge, every denial she had made became an inescapable loop. All the gazes around her began to shift, no longer filled with curiosity, but now heavy with silence. That feeling started to overwhelm her as she realized that it wasn't just David who was being judged, but herself. The words she had thrown out now felt like stones thrown into a pond, shattering and creating ripples that could never be erased. She looked up, seeing the eyes of the customers and staff around her, but not with the same contempt as before. Instead, they were eyes of awareness, eyes that had just witnessed something revealed within this luxurious lobby. She couldn't lie to herself anymore that the gossip from earlier was simply an unfounded judgment. David still stood there, not saying a word, but in his gaze she saw something unshakable, something that couldn't be swayed. It wasn't a challenge, but a quiet, resolute confidence, as though he had already known what was going to happen. Monica, though reluctant to admit it, had been defeated by his silence. It wasn't surrender, but strength. It was the strength of a person who knows their worth without needing to explain it. The eyes around her seemed to await some kind of action, some gesture from Monica, but she couldn't react. She couldn't deny the truth that was standing right before her. There was only silence, a silence filled with power. David hadn't done anything, yet his silence had spoken volumes. She turned away, looking at the computer screen again. Her fingers no longer moved across the keys in the same way. Each keystroke now felt mechanical, meaningless. Monica had lost her confidence, but more importantly, she had realized that value couldn't be measured by appearances, by accounts, or by material things. And in that moment, she felt a value that was unlike anything she had ever recognized, one that was easily seen but hard to grasp. Respect. David didn't need to say anything more. He had shown her that respect couldn't be demanded or bought. It was something you earned through your actions, your treatment of others, and sometimes through simply confronting the silence that others bring your way. At this moment, the atmosphere in the lobby seemed to be covered by a thin mist, with not a single sound, just a dense silence, as though time itself had come to a halt. Monica still sat there, her eyes no longer confident, only a growing sense of exhaustion and regret slowly spreading within her. David didn't need to say anything further because everything was already clear. His silence had spoken everything. But what Monica couldn't understand was how someone like him could maintain such composure. She looked once more at the black card resting silently on the counter. That card was no longer just a symbol of wealth, of power. It had become a reminder that not everything could be measured by superficial appearances. David chose silence, and in that silence, he had triumphed. Monica could feel his unwavering calm, but at the same time it was a challenge, one that didn't need words. How could she face someone who wasn't moved by her judgments? How could she respond to someone who didn't care about her mockery? And then, as if there was nothing more to wait for, she heard footsteps. The steps of those who had been watching this unfold. The steps of those who understood that no matter what, this wasn't just a story of one individual. It was the story of all of them, about how they treated one another, about how they defined their worth and the worth of others. David walked out slowly, calmly, but there was something powerful about his pace. He didn't turn back to look at Monica, but she could feel the change in the air. Not a change of shame or guilt, but a shift in self-respect. At that moment, the whispers in the lobby slowly died down. All the gazes, all the words were no longer focused on David. Instead, there was a different kind of silence, a silence of understanding, of something greater unfolding. Monica looked at the computer screen one more time. This time, there was no coldness or disdain. It was an acknowledgement that she had been wrong. She had been too quick to judge others by their external appearances, by their assets, by the facades they put up. But in that moment, she realized that true value couldn't be measured by those things. David left the hotel, not with a triumphant smile, but with a peace that few could ever achieve. He didn't need to say anything or prove anything. He had done the most important thing. He had left a lasting impression on the hearts and minds of those who had once looked down on him. Monica's story with David wasn't over, but the first step had been taken, a change in the way they viewed people, a change in the way we measure our own worth and the worth of others. As David walked away from the front desk, the atmosphere in the lobby seemed to change completely. The gazes that had once been directed at him now shifted, but there was no longer any mockery, no more arrogant smiles. Instead, there was a heavy silence, as if everyone had just witnessed something profound that they didn't know how to process. Monica sat there for a moment, her hands still gripping the keyboard. Although she no longer looked directly at the screen, the light from the monitor still reflected in her eyes. Every word she had typed earlier echoed in her mind. Every keystroke that had once made her feel powerful now felt like invisible knives cutting into her own conscience. She couldn't deny it. She had been wrong. David hadn't done anything except maintain his silence, and in that silence, he had caused her to question herself. How could a simple black card, an object she had once scoffed at, have such an effect? How could she have allowed herself to judge someone so hastily based on their appearance? Monica realized in that moment that everything she had done and everything she had believed in was just a facade. She had built a mask of perfection to hide her own insecurities. And David, the man who didn't even try to impress, was the one who had managed to break through that mask with nothing but silence. He hadn't needed to flaunt anything. He hadn't needed to prove anything. He simply existed with quiet confidence, and that was enough. A light breeze blew through the window, causing the curtains to flutter slightly. Monica felt as if she had just woken up from a long, ignorant sleep. She now understood that success, fame, or power couldn't be measured by appearances or possessions. From that moment on, she began to see the world differently, and herself as well. She had learned a valuable lesson: respect for others, and more importantly, respect for oneself, cannot be demanded or bought. It must be earned through genuine actions, through honesty, and sometimes through standing firm in the silence of one's own integrity. And in that moment, Monica decided that she would no longer measure others by their external wealth or status, but by the deeper, unspoken values that truly mattered. David had shown her that real strength didn't come from showing off. It came from knowing your worth without the need to prove it to anyone. The surroundings seemed to shift completely as David walked out of the hotel. His steps were steady, calm, not rushing, not trying to prove anything. He was just a man, passing through life without seeking attention. But in the eyes of the people left behind in the lobby, something had changed. What they thought they knew about the value of a person had been turned upside down in that moment. A black card, a seemingly insignificant object, made them reconsider everything they had believed about power and respect. It wasn't about what we own, but about how we face the world that truly matters. Monica stood still, her hands still resting on the keyboard, but now she no longer felt any drive to continue with her work. Her fingers, once wildly tapping away, had stopped. She felt as though she had just experienced a mental storm. All her life she had lived by superficial values, judging others based on appearances. But now in this moment, when faced with David's calm silence, she realized that everything she thought was true had been a facade. The whispers around her continued, but no one spoke about David anymore. The mocking glances, the sneers, they were gone. Instead, there was only silence, a silence not of failure, but of respect. People around her began to realize that sometimes strength doesn't come from words, but from silent, unwavering action, from standing firm without needing to prove yourself, from the patience of someone who knows their worth. David wasn't the only one who learned a lesson in that moment. Monica, though still standing silently, felt herself changing too. She realized that in this world, not everyone knows how to stand strong in the face of judgment, to endure criticism without losing themselves. David had shown that sometimes silence and patience are the most powerful weapons a person can wield. Perhaps, sometimes in life, we need to face challenges, to endure criticism without retaliating, without trying to prove ourselves, but simply standing firm and letting time reveal our true value. David had done that subtly, without words, without defending himself. Just his presence had been enough to change everything. Monica continued to gaze toward the door where David had left. She knew she had learned a valuable lesson, one she would never forget. From now on, she would no longer judge people based on their external appearances, wealth, or status. She was ready to start her journey of finding true value in life. True change begins from within, and Monica could feel it with every passing moment. She no longer felt alone in the crowd, no longer felt the need to live according to the expectations of others. She had found her own path, a path not governed by appearances or material wealth, but by kindness and respect. David didn't look back, but his silence left a deep mark on the hotel lobby. The entire space seemed to freeze. Not a single word, not a single movement. No one continued to laugh or gossip, and no one looked at him with disdain. What had once been mockery now turned into awareness, the stillness of something greater than outward appearances. In those few moments, Monica felt a distinct change. The whispers around her about David's superficiality now seemed like a lack of self-respect on her part. She had lived for so long behind a perfect facade, deceiving herself with standards she didn't truly understand. But in that instant, everything shattered. She realized that true self-respect and honesty were what truly mattered. Monica looked at the door David had walked through. She didn't say anything, but she felt as though she had learned a valuable lesson. Not everything in life could be judged by the surface. People's value couldn't be measured by their possessions or status. The real value lay in how we treat others, how we stand up for ourselves without needing to show off, and how we remain calm when confronted with disrespect. Monica had learned something she hadn't known before. The black card, which she had once laughed at, had now become a symbol of something far more important. It wasn't the wealth or power it represented, but the reminder of her own mistaken judgments. The room began to stir again, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The judgments, the whispers, the disdain had all vanished. What remained was an awareness of the deeper meaning of this encounter. David's quiet presence had forced Monica to face her own shortcomings, but in that silence, there was more power than any words could convey. The real lesson wasn't in what David had said, but in what he hadn't said. It was a lesson in quiet dignity, in knowing that we don't need to prove our worth to anyone. Our value is clear in how we carry ourselves, how we handle life's challenges, and how we treat others with respect. As David left, the atmosphere in the lobby still felt heavy, as though everything had been compressed for too long, and now all of it was searching for a way to escape. The acknowledging glances, the hushed whispers, couldn't hide the truth that had been exposed. No one in the room could deny that David's silence had made them confront themselves. Monica still stood there, her hand trembling slightly as she looked back at the black card on the counter. It no longer seemed like a mere object of showy wealth or pride. It had become evidence of her own contempt and lack of respect. She felt exposed, as though she had been living in a perfect shell to hide a simple but painful truth. She had treated others as lesser simply because they didn't meet the standards she had set for them. Monica sighed. David's silence still echoed in her mind. The glances around her, the uncomfortable stares, were no longer about David. They were about her. She was the one who had misjudged. She was the one who had made assumptions based solely on appearances. A phone rang, snapping Monica out of her thoughts. She looked at the screen and saw her manager's name flash. A simple yet clear message. "We need to talk." Monica took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure before answering the call. On the other end, her manager didn't need to condemn her. Everything was already clear. And though he didn't say anything explicitly, Monica could feel the disappointment in his voice. Part of her wanted to deny what had happened, but the other part knew she couldn't escape the truth. The truth that she had judged someone solely based on their outward appearance, dismissing their true value. Monica, what are we going to do to change this? This isn't the first time this has happened, and we need to address this. This hotel is not just about the facilities and services, it's about how we treat people, regardless of their position or background. Those words hit Monica like a shock. She realized that this wasn't the first time she had witnessed injustice, the first time she had seen someone like David being underestimated or disrespected because of how they appeared. She had often convinced herself that people like him didn't belong in places like this, that they were just there to spend money and leave. But today, everything had changed. She had seen the truth from a completely different angle. Monica didn't respond immediately. She just remained silent, thinking about everything that had happened, realizing that she needed to change the way she saw others, starting with herself. She could no longer live in a world where appearances and wealth determined people's value. She had learned that lesson, even if it had come too late. When Monica hung up, she didn't feel regret for what had happened, but she did feel a shift in her thinking. She began to realize that treating others with respect and fairness wasn't something far off. It was a choice she could make every day. After the call with her manager, Monica felt as though she had just woken up from a long, dreamlike sleep. Everything in the lobby, from the phone ringing to the final glance from David, seemed to have changed her. She stood up from the chair, looking at the black card on the counter that she had once mocked. Now, it had become something far greater than anything she could hold in her hands. The people in the lobby were no longer distracted. The mocking glances had disappeared, replaced by a heavy silence. In that silence, something powerful had started to form. No more whispers, no more looks of contempt, only inquisitive gazes, questioning whether they too needed to change. Monica took a deep breath, feeling the shift within herself. She remembered all the times she had judged others based on appearances, wealth, or the way they carried themselves. But now in this moment, she saw the world differently. She understood that true value couldn't be measured by outward appearances or possessions. The real value lay in how we treat others, how we stand firm in our beliefs, and how we remain calm when faced with disrespect. She had learned an invaluable lesson: respect for others, and more importantly, respect for oneself, isn't something that can be demanded or bought. It's something that must be earned through authentic actions, honesty, and sometimes through standing strong in the silence of one's own integrity. And from that moment on, she knew she would no longer judge people based on external factors, but would look for the deeper, unspoken qualities that truly matter. Monica walked out of the lobby, no longer feeling the pressure of trying to prove herself. She didn't feel the need to fake anything, to hide behind a facade, or wonder if she would be judged. She had seen the truth, and though it was hard to face, it was a truth that gave her the strength to move forward. The real change had begun from within. Monica could feel it with every passing moment. She no longer felt isolated in the crowd, no longer bound by others' expectations. She had found her own path, one not defined by appearances or material wealth, but by kindness and respect. At the same time, David left the hotel, not with a visible triumph, but with a peace few could ever achieve. He hadn't said a word, nor did he need to. He had done the most important thing, left a lasting impact on the hearts and minds of those who had once looked down on him. Monica's story with David wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. A change in how people view each other, a change in how we define our own value and the value of others. Thank you for following this story with us. If you found this video inspiring or it helped you see life in a new light, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your feedback. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any exciting and meaningful videos in the future. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next videos. Wishing you strength and confidence on your journey.